This is SportsCenter.
I told him, win, and you will get a contract extension.
Ferguson out, Fletcher in. The worst-kept secret in hockey is finally made official. After trading for him over a decade ago, will Cliff Fletcher now be the one to send Matt Sundin out of Toronto?
Matt's is driving the engine here.
I haven't had any contact with Cliff Fletcher.
Good morning, Canada, and welcome to the SportsCenter Morning Loop. Sitting alongside Dan O'Toole, I'm Jay Onright. Well, it was a little over a week ago that Bob McKenzie first reported the Leafs were talking to Cliff Fletcher about returning to the team as their interim GM. Yesterday, they finally made that move, Dan.
That's right, and as the axe was being lowered at a painfully slow pace, John Ferguson Jr. was the only one who failed to see it. The now fired Leafs GM forced to go with the business-as-usual approach, which would have been fine had the results of his business not gotten him into this mess. Ferguson replaced by Cliff Fletcher, who will take the post on an interim basis. Corey Warren begins our coverage from the Air Canada Centre.
It's nice to be back in Toronto.
Calling himself the custodian of the keys, Cliff Fletcher has 19 months to help turn around the Toronto Maple Leafs. He begins as the interim GM with a mandate to reset the table on a very short timeline.
There's 35 days to the trade deadline, and within 2 weeks we should be prepared to philosophically at least know what direction we have chosen to go in.
And as Fletcher guides the ship, President and CEO Richard Petty will guide the search for a successor, a man who will, for once, wield more power than just being a general manager.
We believe that being president and general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs is the top job in hockey. He'll be able to make the tough decisions required to do the job. He will have the full autonomy to lead this hockey club in the manner he feels best.
In the end, it came down to performance for John Ferguson Jr. After 2 years of missing the playoffs, the Leafs are on pace to fall short again, on pace to miss the postseason 3 years in a row for the first time ever in franchise history.
I told him, win, and you will get a contract extension. And hit your objectives, and we've never hit it.
The challenge of the manager is no different than in the 29 other markets, and that's to get your club to Stanley Cup. The only regret I have here is that I failed to do that and to bring this club into position to win a cup.
I'm disappointed with our performance for him. But listen, this guy's a very, very bright man, hard-working guy, and he's going to do just fine.
So now the Leafs' plan changes. Fletcher says the entire coaching staff will stay for the remainder of the season, but the roster is sure to change, leading to even more speculation about Matt Sundin, the Leafs' most marketable asset.
Matt's is driving the engine here. He's an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year, and he has a no-trade clause.
I haven't had any contact with Cliff Fletcher in a long time, so I don't know anything about it. I don't really want to speculate.
But others may find themselves looking over their shoulders as well.
I think it's inevitable. But there's a simple solution to all these things, and there has been. From the start of the year, we just can win some games.
It's very unfortunate because I think the players have to be accountable at the end of the day, because we're the ones that play the game. We're the ones that have to go out there and make sure that we get the job done, and we weren't getting the job done.
John meant so much to a lot of us here, and he's always been a first-class person, and supported everybody on this team and their families, and he's a great person, and I wish him well.
Cliff Fletcher admits that the league has changed since his last go-around with the Toronto Maple Leafs and his famous draft schmaft comment. He says before, a free agent spending spree could camouflage a general manager's mistakes. But he says now in a salary cap world, a team needs to draft well and to develop its own talent, something the Leafs have struggled with for years. Corey Warren, TSN, Toronto.
No shortage of critics for the job that John Ferguson did as GM of the Maple Leafs, but the moves criticized the most may very well have been his undoing, from the acquisition of Andrew Raycroft to the signing of Pavel Kabina. The Ed Belfour extension is the most baffling, I think. With Cliff Fletcher be able to fix the team? With their thoughts, James Duthie in the NHL and TSN panel.
Thank you. Alongside Pierre Maguire, Darren Dreger, and Bob McKenzie. Gentlemen, Cliff Fletcher now becomes the highest profile temp in hockey history. As the 72-year-old the right man for the job?
Why would you throw age into the equation? Absolutely, he's the right guy for the job. The major reason being he has a hammer. If Richard Petty's to be believed, and I believe him to be a man of his word, then Cliff Fletcher now has a hammer. He doesn't have to delegate to anybody else. He can make the deals.
Well, he may have the hammer, but he's the product of divide here. I mean, Richard Petty wanted Cliff Fletcher on board, so Cliff Fletcher is hired as the interim general manager. Larry Tannenbaum, the chairman of the board, did not want Cliff Fletcher, although he concedes as the plan B. That dissension, that divide isn't going anywhere. And the reality here, as we know it, is that Cliff Fletcher is going to have to lean on the same type of management structure, the Jeff Jacksons, the Mike Pennys, the Doug Gilmores, the same people assembled by John Ferguson on an interim basis.
Cliff Fletcher's the right man at the right time. He's got a mandate to clean the decks a little bit, do some rebuilding, but he knows the league. He knows the league people. He knows how to make a deal. He knows how to get things done in the short term.
All right, what's the most pressing job? What's the first thing on his agenda?
Bob just said it, clear the deck. It's real simple. Right now you identify, you can move everybody. There's only one person on that team right now that Cliff Fletcher should be loyal to, and that's Matt Sundin. His best acquisition as a general manager back in the 1990s. He owes no loyalty to anybody else on that team. And the reason being, these guys are all disposable assets right now. Not all of them are going to bring you a huge return, but now's a chance for Cliff Fletcher to clear the deck.
So you're saying don't trade Sundin?
Well, I think you have to.
Oh, okay.
But the one thing you go to him and you're a gentleman, you say, here, Mats, here's the deal. I want to move you to a Stanley Cup contender. I'm not holding you hostage, but at the end of the day, we need you. In order to make this organization better, we need to move you.
Well, and they have no shot of getting him back. I mean, if Matt Sundin leaves, he's leaving
at
for
37,
good.
Are you
He's
concerned?
For good. Well, I mean, he's an unrestricted free agent, still has plenty of fuel in the tank. But you're right, that is going to be a real tough challenge for Cliff Fletcher. The reality is, in conversation with his agent, J.P. Barry, Sundin's agent, he thinks that Cliff Fletcher might have a better chance of convincing Matt Sundin to sign a one-year contract extension as opposed to getting him to waive his no trade. That's how tough it's going to be.
It's an important point because a lot of people believe they could trade Matt Sundin and that he'd come back next year just like the Dougie Waite situation. So you say that doesn't happen. Now they hired Toronto lawyer Gordon Kirk to help Richard Petty with the search for a new full-time general manager. What do they look for? Who do they look for?
Well, you heard Richard Petty go the laundry list of qualities that they're looking for in a general manager and president. On top of that, winning track record, all of that. And the same three names are popping up over and over again in terms of currently employed guys that they're going to go out and maybe try to hire away. Brian Burke of the Ducks, Jim Rutherford of the Carolina Hurricanes, and Kenny Holland of the Detroit Red Wings. Interesting scenarios in all three. Keep in mind, they're all employed. Burke's in the middle of a long-term contract extension negotiation with the Ducks. Jim Rutherford's in the midst of a 5-year contract, but has a unique arrangement with owner Peter Karmanos where he possibly, if he wanted to, might be able to extract himself from that situation. And Ken Holland right now, who knows? Right now he seems to be happy in Detroit. You've got the Scotty Bowman factor out there. You've got Steve Yzerman. You've got all these other names kicking around. The whole dynamic with this job is very simple, guys. There are general managers out there who are looking at it and saying, why do I need the hassle? It's a meat grinder. I don't need to do it. On the other hand, the same guys are saying to themselves, you know what? It's an unbelievable challenge. I could get $2, $3, $4 million a year, a long-term deal. And if I ever got that team to the Stanley Cup Finals, my legacy in hockey would be way, way, way up here for all the cups I may have won somewhere else. So it is intriguing to these people.
It's like Groundhog Day. I don't know exactly who saw the shadow, but we're now guaranteed 6 more months of speculation.